Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Elephant in the Room. And today it's my singular pleasure to be interviewing Ms. Siham Momin, all the way from Hargeisa in Somaliland. Siham is a US-trained public health specialist and currently works also as a dialectical behavioral therapist in Hargeisa. And I met Siham most recently when she was assisting us, particularly working with President Ernest Bai Koroma, who was leading the International Observer Mission, of which I was a part. So I start by saying, Asante Sana, thank you very much for all the work that you did in assisting our observer mission during the elections that were held in Somaliland on the 1st of June. And there's been a lot of talk about them. And I just wanted to talk to you as somebody who also observed the elections very closely, but also as a citizen of Somaliland, just for you to be able to give our viewers around the world a bit of background about Somaliland, the politics society of Somaliland. I've done a bit of reading about it. Kenya is next to Somalia, Mogadishu, Somalia. So we know a bit less about the Hargeisa, Somaliland. And so I was hoping you can start, Siham, by just giving us a brief overview of Somaliland's quite unique history, especially after independence in 1960, and then this declaration of independence in 1991. Just give us a bit of background about that, please.
People, misunderstand the whole history of recognition and where it all started. So I'll just give you a brief overview. So in 1960, 26 June, Somaliland gained its independence from the British colonial powers. Somaliland used to be a British protectorate. And at that time, in 26 June, Somaliland actually was recognized by over 30 countries. And 5 days later, the Italian British, which today Somalia, gained its independence. And on that day, the two countries joined forces to build the Somali Republic, which was the dream of the Somali, people at that time, to have this great nation, powerful, and all the Somalis are united. And it was supposed to be the 5 Somali regions. It just happened to be that the first 2 Somali countries that joined forces were British Somaliland, which is Somaliland today, and Italian Somaliland. But the hope was that the other 3 Somali countries, Djibouti, Ogaden, and then will join the forces too, and it would be the 5 great Somali nations. That fell short because the union did not even pass the 2 countries, just making it work. It didn't work. There was a lot of injustices. There was a lot of suffering that Somaliland faced under that union. And then it was exacerbated and it was intensified when the one of 20th century's famous dictators, Siad Barre, came into power. Those injustices intensified, and then there was civil wars that were fighting that dictator, and in that, the whole union collapsed. In that war, the whole union collapsed, and then it was then when that regime was brought down that Somaliland seized the opportunity and reclaimed its independence from Somalia, or the Somali Republic Union, and that was in May 18, 1991. And yeah, so that's.
If I can just pause a little. Siad Barre was to be the president of all of Somaliland, of all of Somalia, But immediately after the coming together, there were difficulties. How long did the war last between Somaliland and Somalia, Mogadishu, before the Somaliland declared independence in 1991? When did the actual hostilities begin? Was it in the 70s, the 80s, or?
The 80s. So the union was 30 years altogether, but like 1 year in, people had started, having doubts and questions right away. Like in 1961, right away when the rules and the regulations of the new union was being made, there were doubts from people of Somaliland right away. But the union lasted for 30 years, and then the war was the last 10 years of the union.
Okay. I was fascinated. I had the honor and the privilege of visiting is it the town of Burko, where the independence was declared on the 18th of May 1991 by a group of elders. Tell me something about the role of the elders in Somaliland. They seem to be very essential to political, social life in Somaliland. And how is it that a group of elders could sit under a tree really and talk and decide, and the entire country says, okay, we're going in this direction?
Yeah, so Somaliland has the House of Elders, which is a very fascinating phenomena, but it's a crucial part of the foundation of Somaliland and the peace and stability that we have today. And this group of elders actually first came about in 1982 or 1980, I think, when the Somali national movement, SNM, was starting their movement to reclaim their sovereignty and to reclaim back their country. That was when they were first introduced as a means to, mobilize people to join the movement, but also resources and housing and stuff like that. So that was when they first came into the equation. SNM included them in that institution. SNM was the Somali National Movement. So then when people came back in and Somaliland was declared independent, they actually hosted they were a big part of the first two conferences. The one was the one in Puro in 18 May 1991, and that was where Somaliland was declared. And the second one was in 1993, and that conference was in Boroma, and that was where the government and institution was established. That was where the country transitioned from the SNM power to now a government, a democratic government that has 3 legislative branches. So they have really played a big part of the democracy that we have today, the peace we have today, and they're part of the institution. Actually, we have 2 houses. We have the House of Parliament, and then we also have the House of Elders. So they have a great power when it comes to how this country runs, decision making, and all of that. And the unique thing about them is, and all indigenous processes in the continent and everywhere in communities where there are indigenous ways of doing things, but they also have limitations as we evolve and we move towards democratic processes. So the Gurti, or the House of Elders in Somaliland, there will be no Somaliland without them today, for sure. They have been a strong players in the foundations of this country. But eventually, we would need to find better ways we can evolve them in the democratic process, ways where we could have them be part of the process, but in a way moving from that, traditional systems that have a lot of limitations and challenges today.
If I was just to ask, I said, when we observe the elections, one of the really striking things about observing elections in Somaliland, spend some time in Hargeisa, in Burko, in Sheikh, which is in the east of Somaliland, and colleagues in other parts of the country, was, Somaliland is an extremely peaceful society, very cohesive society. And what would you say is the role? I mean, when we think of Somalia, we think of Al-Shabaab, insecurity, war. But Somaliland has been able to have several democratic, cycles. There's several election cycles. I think this was the 8th one. You've been able to elect your president, the parliament, etc. It's a proportional representation system, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe if you just give me a bit of background as to, the sense I got just mixing with ordinary citizens was there was no sense of great urgency. People were not very anxious about the results. Even the chairman of the Electoral Commission was a very relaxed gentleman every time we met him. What explains this? The fact that elections don't seem to be that big a deal. They're important, yes, and everyone participates. But how come they're so calm as processes in Somalia?
Well, there are a couple of things. And one big part of that is the Gurti and the clan-based power sharing, agreements that people have, which makes sure that everyone is allowed to have representation in the political system through clan arranged systems. So people feel satisfied and trusted to these institutions because they feel represented. And like you said, we had 7 elections prior to these that happened in a peaceful and a fair way where none of them was rigged. So people had positive experiences with the election system, and they had no worries that somehow this election was going to be rigged towards someone or a party or a group. In fact, like we've been seeing around the world, even in America, one of the strongest countries in this world, where people were not satisfied either with the election process this year or the results. The losing team was claiming that the election has been rigged, that dead people were voting. And I think it comes from, a place where people don't really see themselves reflected in the system, where in Somaliland, everyone, either through a clan system or an age group, somehow, feels represented and seen. And like I said, this has been seen before where everything goes according to the plan. So it was just, a peaceful day. Everyone went to vote, and the next day was business as usual. And people were just waiting for the results. So I would say because of experience, but also because of the way our political system is built or set up.
One of the things that was really quite striking about observing elections in Somaliland is that the voting age is 15. So it was very interesting to watch young teenagers walking into the polling stations to vote. How did that come about, and what kind of impact do you think that has on the quality of democracy and society in Somaliland?
Well, Somaliland's population is very young. I think about 74% is below 30 years old. So Africa as a whole is a very young continent, but Somaliland in particular is a very young country. So it was good that, besides the age, the 15-year-olds voting, like people from 15 to 30 were the majority voters this year. They came out because they understood that whoever goes into office is affecting their life the next 5 years. The next time this 15-year-old votes, he's going to be 20 years old. And whatever decisions those people make on behalf of him the next 5 years, it's going to affect him. So I think people truly this time, thanks to the power of social media,
yes,
and the powerful campaigns that some people ran really understood the power of voting and choosing the people that you want to represent your interests. So that's why a lot of young people came out, even 15-year-olds, teenagers, to vote for the people they thought best represented their interests. And that's why a lot of young people were among the people who were elected this year compared to the last leaving parliament. The last leaving parliament was much older age-wise than these incoming representatives. And yeah, it was pleasant to see actually young people this time, hugely in number, being elected because of those young voters.
A question that I'd ask, very peaceful, very successful system of elections in Somaliland, but not very many women are elected or in positions of authority. Why is that? And what is being done for there to be more inclusivity of women in Somaliland's political life?
Yeah, truly one of the, for me as a person, as a young educated woman, one of the biggest disappointments of this election was the fact that 0 women were elected into parliament. There were 3 women elected into local council, not in Hargeisa, but in other regions. But the fact that, there were so very little women representation was very disappointing. But that doesn't take away from like how wonderful this election was for me as a person. One of the biggest issues and challenges that women in Somaliland face, I think, is the traditional systems, the traditional processes that are that are always male dominated. So those traditional processes play a big part of the election process and the selection process as well. So this year, actually, it was the first time that 28 women made it to to be listed as candidates, which was a huge step, for 28 women to even pass that, because even I think last election was only 10 women who were on the list of candidates. So that in itself, for me, comparing how many people were in the list last election to this, that's an improvement from 10 candidates to 28 candidates. That's a huge number. So traditional system is a big, big obstacle for women. And that's why I was saying with every indigenous process that's successful, it has limitations too. And it definitely has limitations on our constitution and democracy, because women are hardly able to participate because of that. But also there is economical issues, these campaigns and political processes are costly, and oftentimes women don't have the means to have a very successful campaigns that, make it to the end and are fruitful. But also one thing that we really need to work on for the next election is to educate voters. Because at the end of the day, it's those people who are going to be voting. And even though, 40% of the voters were women, I think the people that spoke to them were not women. The campaigns that spoke to them were not women. The campaigns that attracted them were not women. And oftentimes, I think in these campaigns were very nice hotels and extravagant. You need to have a grounds level campaign. One of the 2 candidates that got the highest, votes this year, one is going to be the mayor of Hargeisa, and one was elected as a representative. They each one got 20,000 votes, and the other one got 26,000 votes. And it was because they had a bottom-up campaign. They went into places that normally people don't go to. They went to young people. They presented issues that spoke to people. And I think that's where, as a woman, that's what we need to work on. We need to educate voters, and we need to speak to them, because at the end of the day, they will be the ones deciding your next win. But also we need to work on the traditional systems and maybe have even quota in place so that women could have a foot at the door and there was a quota that was being worked on. It was not successful. That was 30% of the seats would be for women. Eventually, it didn't succeed. It didn't vote in. But that's something that we could revisit for the next elections eventually. But even though women didn't make it, there are a lot of people and a lot of women that voted for the men who got elected. So we're hoping that they understand that women voted them in, that they would lobby for their interest and pass laws that bring them on board the next time around.
When we traveled to Somaliland to observe the elections, some of the criticisms that we received was from from Somalia, Mogadishu, and the other Somalis, and it's, one of their criticisms was that, listen, yes, it looks very peaceful, but this is simply because this is a Interclan deal amongst the Isak clan. They're simplifying it like that. And how would you respond to when those kind of accusations are thrown?
Well, I think that specific accusation often comes from leaders in those Somali regions. But as a citizen, what I would say to that is it's a dishonest and not true statement. In fact, there are 4 major clans that inhabit in this area. So to really narrow it down to one clan, that's not true, and that's very dishonest. But also, like, morally, it's wrong. It's wrong because it discredits the work that a lot of people contributed to this one clan, and it discredits the other clans that have contributed to everything that Somaliland is today. When you give all the credit and work to this one clan, you're taking away from everyone else who had contributed to this for the last 30 years. But there are, countries actually that are one tribe, one that have much greater issues than we have. That's not true. It's in fact the work of many people, clans regardless, that made Somaliland today. And it's just simplifying and discrediting the work when you say, oh, it's just one clan, that's why it works. Yeah. Not true. There are many people who are homogenous that have greater issues than we do.
One of the striking observations when one visits Somaliland and spends time in the streets and meeting the people in Hargeisa and also in the rural areas is a high level of trust that seems to be there amongst the people, and a high level of cohesion. What explains this? Is it because of not being recognized for so long by the international community? But what explains this high level of cohesion that makes a very calm atmosphere, low levels of crime, even Al-Shabaab, which has caused a lot of havoc in other countries in the region, hasn't been able to penetrate Somaliland?
Yeah, so part of it is because you said it, it's when it almost feels like us against the world. Nobody recognizes us. So I think people truly understand that we are, all we have, us having each other's back is all we have. But also, the war was not that long ago. It was only 30 years ago. So my parents' generations that have went through the war are still alive. They know what it feels like to be homeless, to be walking days at a time to get to a safe place. So I think oftentimes people really vividly remember all of this trauma and struggles they have went through to be here today, to be with each other, with as families, and to really know what it feels like to have a peace. Because I think you truly understand the value of something when you lose it. They had, happy lives, everything was good, to then go from that to walking. I know my mom walked her family. She was young back then, but she said her family walked days from where they lived to this camp to get to safety. So that piece also brings people together, that common trauma that they had, and to experience this today, that brings them together. But also the elders, the elders are this piece that glues us together, that keeps this part of the region, that indigenous process. And in fact, there was Al-Shabaab tried to come to this region
Mm.
some time ago. I think it was in 2008. They tried to come here, but their mission didn't work because people called them out. Someone found out where they were living. People did not collaborate with them. Where I think in other parts, people collaborate with them, and that's why they are multiplying in number and power. But here, because people value their peace, value the land, value this country, it was hard for them to thrive and, be on the low and do things. That's another issue.
It's amazing how quickly time flies. But I wanted to ask one final question, Siham, is Somalia continues to insist that Somaliland is a breakaway province of Somalia. And there's nervousness also within the African Union that to recognize Somaliland would be to promote secessionism, which everyone is, of course, in Africa, we're all nervous about it because we all have internal difficulties, and if the country start to fragment, it can become a process that is unstoppable. And so there's been caution about this. How would you, as a Somalilander, respond to this kind of nervousness that the African Union has, and it is also reflected in the attitudes of the international community that has failed to recognize Somaliland for these 30 years?
Well, truly, I don't think Somalia will persist. The issue with Somalia persisting is the leadership. If you ask a regular Somali like me how they truly feel about Somaliland being a country, being independent, establish what they have established, they're in support of it. I have friends from the other side of friends from Somalia who are just like me. I have no ill wills for Somalia. In fact, I want Somalia to succeed and stand up and be stable like here. Those are my people. We share a language, we share a religion, we share a culture, and vice versa. The people feel that too. And it's just the leadership that is persisting on this, scenario of unity. And, once Somaliland lives, it's going to be this Pandora box, and the whole region and the continent as a whole is just going to follow. It's not true. And Somaliland is unique in that Somaliland was a country before this union, And I know there's a law, and in that us willingly joining the union, we have given up our, sovereignty. That's very clear. We know that. But the fact that we were a country to begin with should create some sort of sympathy that we're not just a breakaway state or preference. We were a country to begin with. We thought we were going to benefit from this union. It didn't work out. So now we're back to square one. We really want to build our country. We've already built our country. You were a witness. You came here, you've seen it.
Yes.
And we really could help the region and the continent as a whole. We're a big part of the stability of this region. What's going on in Ethiopia, what's going on in Somalia. We are really, we're holding it down. We're a big part of the stability of this region. So us being a stable, recognized country is only going to benefit the region and the continent that much more. It's not going to take away anything from it. And I think there was a report by the African Union in 2005 that actually suggested that we get recognized. But like you said, the continent and the leaders got nervous that if this recommendation is acted on, maybe it will encourage other parts to seek similar scenarios. But the Western world also was nervous of how that might destabilize Somalia even more. But I think, the conversation should really be level up from comparing us to Somalia a lot, because I personally believe we're not even in a place where the two countries can be compared. We have established peace and like harmony and stability for 30 years. Somalia still hasn't done that. So even this conversation of comparing the two countries a lot, I think takes away from our achievements, because it just seems like we're comparing apples and oranges, and that's not fair. It's like two different situations. Um, and I think, honestly, Somaliland being recognized and more powerful will help stabilize, Somalia. And even though we are, not recognized by Somalia as a country, um, we have been in help to Somalia. There are a lot of people from that side that have, moved and live here because of the war. Um, there's much more we could do as a country, for Somalia, but also for the region. Um, and I really don't reason with the concerns that a lot of people have, because they're not based on reality or reason. It's just fears.
Siha Mumin, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much. It's time always flies when you're having an interesting conversation. I hope we will find time to be able to have a further conversation and delve into some of these issues deeper. I wish you all the best. I wish you, we enjoyed our time in Somaliland very much. We're very impressed by it, and we wish Somaliland the very best. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing me on the Elephant family. I hope there would be many more conversations. And thank you for giving us a chance and taking on a risk besides what you've been told about the region, and really coming to see it for yourself. And I know we have a friend in you. I know you would be cheering us on, and I know you will be supporting us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.